Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Claire Hayes, and I am going to talk with you today about the basics of Read Live. This presentation will be an overview presentation that will cover big picture ideas behind the programs that are running within the suite of programs in Read Live. As many of you may know, Read Live consists of 4 programs. Read Live first program is our primary flagship intervention, which we call Read Naturally Live. That program goes from 1st through 8th grade reading level. Word Warm-Ups Live is the next intervention within the Read Live suite of programs. That is a phonics program with phonics instruction and decoding practice. There are 3 levels, 1 syllable, 2 syllable, and multisyllabic levels, and both of those programs are interventions. The third program listed here is 1 Minute Reader Live, and that is a completely independent reading program. That goes from 1st grade through mid-5th grade reading level and does not need the assistance of a teacher. So it's great for homework, independent reading time, or summer. Finally, we have Read Naturally Live Español, which is the Spanish version of Read Naturally Live, and that goes from 1st through mid-5th grade level. The Read Live platform is a comprehensive research-based set of interventions and in an independent program. Read Naturally has been around for well over 30 years now, so we've been in thousands of schools and districts throughout the country. This program is ideal for settings like RTI, MTSS. Read Naturally the strategy was created back in the late 80s by a special education teacher whose main objective was meeting each student where they are. And so not only are you able to select which program or programs are right for each individual student, there's ways to differentiate within each program as well. It's a cloud-based platform. So anytime a student has a device, iPad, laptop, desktop, or Chromebook, and an internet connection, students can work in the program. As I'm sure you know, there's 5 components to teaching reading. They're listed on your slide here. We touch on all of these in one or more of the programs. Our largest emphases are fluency, phonics, and comprehension, and we do have some strong support for vocabulary and work on phonemic awareness. We all know what fluency is, but I always like to just state it to make sure we're all on the same ground. It's a combination of things. It's not race reading. It's accurate reading with expression, sounding the way that we do when we speak. We need all of these things to be part of fluent reading. And we like fluent reading because it's a lot more fun to listen to and a lot more enjoyable to be able to read that way. But the ultimate goal, the main reason it is so important to all of us, as we know, is that for a vast majority of our students, oral reading fluency is incredibly highly correlated with comprehension. As you can see on this table, it was a study done on a group of special education students, and there are many, many studies that are similar to this one, showing that the measures on the left-hand side, ways that we measure comprehension in many cases. And on the right-hand side, we can see the validity coefficient. Well, a statistician would say that a validity coefficient is of 0.6 or higher is considered highly correlated. So all of these measures are highly correlated. But you'll notice the last one on the bottom, oral reading fluency, is the most highly correlated with how students perform on standardized comprehension tests. So I just want to demonstrate something for you for a moment. I want you to walk through this activity with me. And I'm going to ask that you read the words on the screen out loud. So when students work in Read Live, whether they're working in Read Naturally Live or Word Warm-Ups Live or 1 Minute Reader Live, they are reading out loud. We have no idea what our kids are doing unless they're reading orally. So even though you are in your own school, in your own room, I'm going to ask that you read the words that you see on this screen out loud. I want you only to read the first line and the second line. Read them as accurately and rapidly as you can, and of course, read them orally. Beginning with this first letter in the upper left-hand corner, read line 1 and line 2 out loud. Please begin. Stop right there. All right, easy, right? You can rattle those off real quickly. Probably they were some of the first words you learned to read. Now what I want you to do is not read the word, but instead I want you to say the color that the word is written. And again, I want you to do it as accurately and rapidly as you can. I want you to do it out loud. And I only want you to name the colors in the first 2 lines. Okay, so beginning again, naming the color of this first word that's written. Please begin. Now, I can't hear you, but I suspect I've done this slide and presented the slide enough to know that many of you may have started to laugh around the end of the first line, and the wheels kind of come off the bus somewhere between the end of the first and the beginning of the second line, which is really amazing if you think about it, because you knew your colors probably years before you knew how to read. If a 3-year-old was in a room with us, she'd be better at this because she knows her colors, but she can't read. But you are so absolutely automatic with reading that you are having this internal fight telling yourself to stop reading, right? It's why graffiti might offend you if you see it, because as soon as your eyes lay on it, you know what it says. Dr. Samuels was a professor at the University of Minnesota, and he put forth a theory called the automaticity theory. And it deals with the fact that reading is multitasking. In order for our students to be good comprehenders, they need to be automatic with their words. In order for them to get there, they need to have a good foundation in phonemic awareness and phonics. They need to address their fluency so that they have a chance of understanding what it is that they're reading. We all know exactly what a disfluent reader sounds like. If you would, turn on that audio portion of your brain for a moment and just listen to your struggling reader read. Think about some of the descriptor words that come to your mind. The first word that always comes to my mind is pain. It is painful to listen to. And just imagine how painful it must be to have to read that way. Most of us know there's trouble within as little as 15 or 20 seconds, right? And many of us have a physical reaction to listening to it. My stomach gets upset and I think, oh gosh, we got issue here, right? So what we want for our students is for them to be able to read at or near the 50th percentile on oral reading fluency norms. Okay, so many of us use a benchmark assessment in the fall, winter, and spring. In the fall, we're identifying who needs the intervention. In the winter, we're seeing who can leave the intervention, who needs to come in. And by the spring, we're checking who's caught up. All of our students make progress as they go from the fall to the winter to the spring. So our struggling readers cannot simply make progress. They will never catch up unless they make more progress than their peers. For example, 3rd graders at just the 75th percentile, so not even the top of the range, but 75th percentile 3rd graders come in reading about 104 words correct per minute. Their peers, no doubt, come in lower. And if you look at where their 25th percentile peers are in the spring, they're not even where the 75th percentile students were in the fall. This is the disparity that we have to close. This is the gap that we have to close. Another thing I just always like to mention is that there is a natural limit to the rate at which students read, at which people read when they read orally, because we read the way that we speak. So adult proficient readers read somewhere between 150 and 200 words correct per minute. As you can see, once we get into those middle school years, students kind of cap out between that range. So we never want to teach students or have students work at getting beyond that. We can work at other things once they get to that point. We know that students become fluent by reading. We also know that independent reading time isn't enough to catch up our peers or our struggling readers. If you think about what your struggling readers do during independent reading time, some of them cause trouble, right? Some of them run around and cause little fires to go around the classroom. But the truth is, most of them just pretend. They pretend to read. It's where illiterate adults learn to hide their illiteracy. It was right in our classrooms, right under our noses. They want to fly under the radar, so they grab a book their friend is reading and they pretend. So in education, teachers always spend time at home trying to figure out how they're going to reach their kids the following day. And so what you can do, I know you've done it. You've got the exact right book at the exact right level for each kid. You have an incentive program set up and you've got candy all over the place. And so you get every single one of your kids to read during 10 minutes of independent reading time. 10 minutes of independent reading time. When the students are reading silently, a proficient reader will easily read 2,000 words. A struggling reader who only reads maybe 50 words in a minute will only read about 500 words. So even if we got these kids to practice the exact same amount of time, it is nowhere near the same amount of practice. It's a disparity of 7,500 words in just one school week, if this is the only time these two kids practice, and we know the difference there too. So luckily, there's a solution. There's a system. The Read Naturally strategy is a system that gets students in the act of reading as much as possible so they can catch up. The Read Naturally strategy uses teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring. All three of these strategies are present in every program within the Read Live suite of programs. So for teacher modeling, students read along with a story, or they have decoding practice with a narrator, and they learn words they didn't know. They solidify words they're unsure of, those high frequency words, because they see the word, say the word, hear the word, all at the same time. And that allows them to learn new words, and it allows them to become proficient with those high frequency words. So in all of our programs, there's an element of teacher modeling. In all of our programs, we also have an element of repeated reading. It's just mastery learning. It's the best way to get better at everything, is to do it over and over again. And so in the Read Naturally strategy, students read either the same passage or the same word list in a phonics lesson. They read it many, many times until they've mastered the words in that lesson to the point that they can read them in another place, right? The kids love that every time they practice, they get further and they read better. But what we care about more is that they are better at reading something the first time. And so because we want it to transfer to new text, they have to have a very high level of automaticity through that repetition in order for it to transfer to the passage they're going to read tomorrow, right? And then the final hook, the final strategy is the hook, and it's progress monitoring. It's the way to get a kid to read a passage over and over again. Because if you have a hard time getting them to read it once, you might be thinking, well, how am I going to get them to read it 10 times? And the way you do it is you time them. And every time they practice, they get further. They start to sound like you do when you read. And that changes the way they view reading. And it even changes the way they view themselves, because they can see that they can do it. And as we all know, anyone who's worked with students knows, we need them to buy in. And so that progress monitoring is what helps them and gets them to buy in. Now, this strategy was created by a special education teacher in the late 80s. She had a little case study that she did with her own students. And she had a system of teaching reading that she believed, of course, at the time, as we all do with what we're doing, is that it was a very effective way of teaching reading. So what she did was she created this different system using teacher modeling and repeated reading and progress monitoring. And she substituted what she was doing with her new system, the Read Naturally system. It wasn't called that then, but that's what it became. And she substituted it just for her special ed kids. And as you can see, the average weekly gain difference was tremendous. And so she had to see if it was going to be the same for her Title I kids. And they made significant more gains with this new system, so she knew it worked. Now, since then, there's been a lot more professionalized studies done through the universities, through the Florida Center for Reading Research. There's many out there proving effectiveness for our fluency and comprehension and so forth. So feel free to look those up if you like. What we're going to talk about for the remainder of today is just a brief overview of each of these programs. Okay, we'll start with Read Naturally Live. That's where we'll spend a little bit more of the time than the other ones, because it is the one that is the most widely used and it covers the longest range of readability levels. Word warm-ups will go into then talking about the different levels that are available and the different steps students go through within Word Warm-ups Live. That independent program, 1 Minute Reader Live, we'll talk about next. That one, again, it goes through mid-5th grade reading level and never needs the teacher support. And then finally, we'll end with talking about Read Naturally Live Español, which goes through mid-5th grade level as well. So let's start talking about our flagship program, Read Naturally Live. As I've mentioned, we work on fluency and phonics and comprehension with supports for vocabulary and some spelling activities. Read Naturally Live builds fluency and motivation through reading short nonfiction, high-interest passages. Students will increase their accuracy and expression by listening to and following along with their audio support. Their comprehension and vocabulary are strengthened. It helps them develop automaticity and decoding for those students who are working in the phonics series. Most of the steps are independent. There's 9 steps in Read Naturally Live, 9 student steps. Students do most of them independently. They need a teacher for at least one, ideally 2 of the steps. And I'll show you that when I show you the step poster in just a moment. But my favorite part about using Read Naturally Live is that students experience success very, very quickly. And it changes the way they view reading. And then your job is way easier once you've made that happen. So we have 3 different series available within Read Naturally Live: the sequence series, the phonics series, and the idiom series. Their levels are listed there on your screen. So the sequence has the widest range, 1st through 8th grade. Phonics series is written at the early 1st through late 2nd or very early 3rd grade level, and the idiom series is in that 3rd and 4th grade level. It's appropriate for any student reading at or below an 8th grade reading level. So 1st grade readers through 8th grade readers, whether they're in an adult literacy program or in an elementary school, all of them are able to see gains using the program. Ideally, you would use Read Naturally Live 30 to 45 minutes a session, 3 to 5 days a week. As with anything, the more time you put in, the more you're going to get out. What we've noticed is that the students who read the most stories are almost always the students who make the most progress. So investing more time into it will get you and your students more progress. Here are the steps that students go through. So after they've been placed into the right level within Read Naturally Live and assigned a story goal within Read Naturally Live, then they can select one of the stories that's presented, again, nonfiction, high interest. Step 2 is keywords. They either get a vocabulary or a phonics lesson, depending on which series they're in. They can type a quick prediction about what the story is going to be about. There's a cold timing. Ideally, you will be with the students for the cold timing to get an accurate words correct per minute score. They can do this step independently if you need them to, but in an ideal world, you'll be able to be with them so that you have that accurate score. It's then graphed for the students so they see where they're at. Then they read along with the audio support till they can actively read along out loud. They practice reading that story independently over and over again until they've mastered the words in that story. And then they can take a quiz. They do either a retell or a word list, depending on the series. So retell for the sequence series students, a word list for the phonics series. They also have a spelling activity in the phonics series. And then in order to pass, the teacher is listening to the student for the final reading. And here are the requirements for passing. Students need to reach their story goal of words correct per minute. They need to read with proper phrasing and expression. They need to be accurate. 3 or fewer errors is all that's allowed on that final timing. And they need to have done their comprehension questions correctly. Now, if they're in the phonics series, they also need to show proficiency on their word list and spelling and the retell. All of these steps are adjustable though. If you're working with 1st and 2nd graders, having them type a prediction and a retell probably doesn't make sense, right? So you can adjust every single step that you see listed on your screen now. So now let's talk for a moment about Word Warm-Ups Live. Word Warm-Ups Live primary focus is phonics, but it's also working on fluency. It's building automaticity through phonics instruction and decoding practice, right? They have some spelling activities and some phonemic awareness activities as well. It will improve students' word recognition. It will help them learn to decode rapidly until they can become automatic. It will help them decode increasingly difficult words and phonologically regular words. They're able to read words with a featured pattern in connected text. So not only are there word lists, but there are stories that students can practice. It reinforces featured phonics skills. It has them spell phonetically regular words. There are 3 levels. Level 1 is 1-syllable words. Level 2 is 2-syllable words. And level 3 is multisyllabic words. So the level 3 is really excellent because what it does is it allows students to practice decoding the words, breaking them apart by syllable, and then blending them together. That's a hard thing for a lot of students to do because the syllables sound a little bit different than blending it together sometimes. And so that's a great level for practicing that. Level 1, level 2, and level 3. So it's appropriate for any student who has phonics needs and that are within the 1st through 4th grade level. Some schools use it as a tier 1 for independent practice for students who just, they're getting these exercises and these lessons in their regular ed classroom, and now here's an opportunity to practice it. It can also be used as a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention for maybe a little bit longer period of time. This step poster is a little different because the exercises have different qualities depending on the exercises. For example, the getting started exercises is an introduction. It's a lot of just phonics instruction in that one. Then there are wordless exercises where they get phonics instruction in the first step. They look, listen, and respond to that step. Then they practice a word list, practice reading words of that word family. They spell words of that word family, and then they have to pass and read that word list for the teacher. Okay, so they do the first 3 steps independently, and that final one, the teacher is required. For a story activity, they read along with the audio support in the story. They practice reading. There's a couple quick quiz questions, and then the teacher listens to them read the story and make sure that they're reading with proper expression and phrasing and accuracy. The next program we're going to talk about briefly today is 1 Minute Reader Live, and 1 Minute Reader Live is that independent program. Its primary focus is fluency. Now, you can never teach fluency in a vacuum. You always have to check for comprehension when you're working on fluency. A fluent reader who doesn't understand is not a good situation, right? So 1 Minute Reader Live has comprehension components. It also has vocabulary components. Students are able to be self-directed. It's highly engaging. They get to read nonfiction, high-interest passages. There's audio support, so they can learn words they don't know. They can start to model some of that expression they hear with that audio support. It will help them develop their fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary skills. And again, they're going to have success because they practice reading for just 1 minute, the same passage, in as little as a minute. They see they can get better, and that's incredibly rewarding. They gain confidence from that. They get to see their graphs get higher, their scores on their screens go up, and that makes them view reading and themselves in a different light. As I've mentioned, there's early 1st through mid 5th grade reading level. So there's 6 levels in that range. E is early 1st. Then we have level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they are leveled for the middle of that grade. So level 5 is mid 5th. It's appropriate for any student who's reading from a mid 5th grade, 1st grade to a mid 5th grade reading level. Now, sometimes our intervention kids have independent reading time in the general ed classroom. Great activity for that. Sometimes our parents ask, what should I do with my students at home? It's a great activity for that. What should I do with my kids over the summer? It's a great activity for that. The bottom item you'll see on this, the bottom 2 items, oftentimes students who no longer need Read Naturally Live, they've graduated from the intervention, they're no longer in trouble, but gosh, it would be nice if they kept reading, right? So 1 Minute Reader is a great transitional program for those kids who exit the intervention, but could still benefit from having a little bit of structure and support. And also we have students who use it very commonly while their peers are being placed into the interventions. So it's a great activity to give your entire classroom that will then free you up to do individualized placement so that you can get each student in the right spot for the interventions. As I mentioned before, at home, summer reading, and during independent reading time. So some of the differences between Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live is that Read Naturally Live is an intervention. It's designed for a small group setting where you have one teacher, 6 to 8 students, and they're all maybe at different reading levels. So they need tailored, targeted levels and materials, but they also need support of a teacher. 1 Minute Reader never needs the support of a teacher. Read Naturally Live goes all the way through 8th grade reading level with 23 different levels. 1 Minute Reader Live only has 6 levels through mid-5th grade. Teacher involvement in Read Naturally Live is that many of the steps students do independently, but the teacher is involved with at least one, ideally 2 steps. And if you have 6, 7 kids in your group and one teacher, that teacher is very busy with the Read Naturally Live intervention, because it creates these beautiful one-on-one opportunities for a student and teacher to work together. You can't have an intervention and put a kid on a device and walk away. So Read Naturally Live, Word Warm-Ups Live, those are interventions. And so the teacher and the student do have times where they will work together. Both of them have lots of reports. In Read Naturally Live, we have fluency, comprehension, and phonics reports. And in 1 Minute Reader, just fluency and comprehension. The steps in 1 Minute Reader are very similar to Read Naturally Live. They pick a story, but then they go directly to cold timing when they don't need a teacher. They can do it independently. Then they read along with the narrator. They practice reading alone a few times. There's a quick quiz, so 4 multiple choice questions and a short answer. And then they can go on. They're never stuck. So they don't have a specific goal to reach. They don't have to complete a specific number of stories in a level. They can navigate as they want. But just like in Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader and Word Warm-Ups Live, the steps can be tweaked depending on the individual needs of the student. You can turn levels off that you know are way too hard or way too easy. So you are able to tailor it again to each individual student. Our final topic today is Read Naturally Live Español. And that primary focus is fluency, and there's lots of support for vocabulary and comprehension. It tends to be frequently used in bilingual settings. It does build fluency in Spanish, and all the passages are still short and nonfiction. They get to increase their accuracy and expression, their comprehension and vocabulary skills in Spanish. And just like in Read Naturally Live, most of the steps are independent. And it does change the way they view themselves and their reading, because they do get to see that immediate success. Read Naturally Live and Read Naturally Live Español are the same system. It's just one is teaching kids to read in Spanish and the other in English. We do at this time only go through mid-5th grade level. All content and directions are in Spanish. You can have English instructions if you want. You can have the teachers can interact with students using an English teacher menu, and you can review and pass the screen in either English or Spanish. So lots of different options for students there. Any student who's reading at a Spanish level, 1st through mid-5th grade level, oftentimes it's native Spanish speaker to develop Spanish reading skills, to help them develop vocabulary and comprehension skills. And it is also often used in a bilingual setting where students are trying to learn a second language. Again, 30 to 45 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. The differences in our English and our Spanish version is the English version is teaching kids to read in English. And the Spanish, of course, is teaching them to read in Spanish. The English version goes up higher, goes through 8th grade, where only mid-5th for Spanish. You have options for a read along in Spanish for the English version, and then you can have instructions in either English or Spanish for both. And the reports are the same. They're covering the same topics: comprehension, fluency, and the steps are the same. So they start with picking a story, keywords, prediction, cold timing, read along, practice, quiz, retell, and pass. So exactly the same steps. So I'm just going to pop out of my PowerPoint for 1 minute before we wrap up, just so I can log into Read Live and let you see it for those of you who haven't seen it. I don't have time to log in as a student and go through all the student steps, although we do have webinars on our website. We have basic webinars on Read Naturally Live and Word Warm-Ups Live and 1 Minute Reader Live. So Read Naturally Live Basics is going to go through the student steps. You'll get to see that in action. 1 Minute Reader Live Basics is going to go through the student steps there. So if you want more details about what it looks like for students, please check those out on our website. And I appreciate Christy putting those in the chat box. Today, all I have time for is to log in as a teacher, and just so you can see a little bit what it looks like from the teacher side. Sometimes it's a little stressful to get things off the ground. So in this webinar, I do like to give people just a view of what it looks like. The first thing I always like to let people know is that we do have a section for learning how to get started. And it is what we call our orientation and resources page. So when I go to that page, I want you to notice that it tells you what role you have within the account. So some people are administrators, some people are school coordinators, and others are teachers. Just like in your school, you have a principal who's an administrator, you have a fifth grade teacher, so you have different roles. And based on your role, you will have a list of your steps, of the things that you need to do to get started. So if you are a teacher within the account, the first thing you have to do is add your students. Maybe your students are already there, so then you just have to check and make sure they're there. The next thing that's essential is you need to place your students. You need to put them in the level and give them the story goal that's right for them. Or in word warm-ups, put them in the section of the level that is right for them from a phonics standpoint. And then finally, you need to prepare your students. So I'm just going to show you how to do these three things quickly. Also notice that there is a drop-down menu in the upper left-hand corner that allows you to navigate to the different sections within the staff module. We're going to start with student setup, because when you go to student setup, that's how you add your students. So if I click that button, the only button in here to add student, and I put in my sample student here, and we enter only the fields that have an asterisk in front of it. We select the grade and the school. We give them a user ID and a password. And then you have to assign the license. I want you to notice that when you assign a student a license, they automatically get access to Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live. We do this so that students have an activity while you place them in the interventions. 1 Minute Reader Live can be implemented immediately with your students without your support. And so as soon as you add them, they can start working in 1 Minute Reader Live. And that will free you up to pull one kid at a time to place them in the interventions. If you want to give them access to the phonics program and or the Spanish program, you do so by just clicking it. All right, so then you click Save and Add Another, or Save and Close. All right, the next thing, now we've added our students, so now we need to place them. So depending on which program you're going to put them in will depend on where you go to place. So in Read Naturally Live, you place students under the tile that's marked Read Naturally Live. So I'm just going to show you where it is. When I click on the Read Naturally Live tile, I have a list of my students. And as you can see, there's a toolbar at the bottom that allows me to scroll left to right. And in the middle here is a place button. So when I have my student sitting next to me, I click on this place button. I estimate the level that I think they're reading at, and I select that level. I will then have them read a passage from that level, and the computer and I will decide whether or not it's a good fit. If it's not, we might have them read a second or maybe even a third. On average, 2 stories is about how many you need to get a kid placed properly. So it takes about 5 minutes per student to place them in Read Naturally Live. Now, if you want to place them in Word Warm-Ups Live, then you're going to go to the tile marked Word Warm-Ups Live. Word Warm-Ups Live has a printable phonics assessment. So you click on that button, it opens in a new tab. And in here are your instructions for the assessment, are your record sheets for the assessment. So what you write on to determine how they did on that assessment, and the assessment that the students use. So you have the student copy that's clean, that students will read off of. You have the teacher copy that the teachers will mark up to indicate their proficiency, and you have the instructions. That's all available to you from here. We also have a scope and sequence in here. So if you want to see which sounds and patterns are taught in which level and section, this scope and sequence is a helpful tool for doing that. So here you can see we have level 1 starts out with letter sounds, and it goes through other vowel sounds. Level 2 starts out in compound words and goes through words with prefixes. And then level 3 starts with word parts prefixes for 3 and 4 syllable words. All right. And then finally, 1 Minute Reader Live. You are able to limit which levels are available to each student by changing their story options. And you can come in here. If you have a student who reads at a 4th grade level, for example, you might turn off these lower levels and leave the higher ones on, or the opposite, depending on each student. You don't have to do that with 1 Minute Reader Live, but you can if you want to. But if you don't, they can get started immediately on their own. So I've talked about adding students. I've talked about placing students. The last thing I want to talk to you about is training students. So on our website, our company website, we have a tab marked training. And if I scroll halfway down, there's a place that says student training videos. The student training videos are separated, one set for each program. So there's 4 sets because there's 4 programs within Read Live. So the very first thing you might do after you add your students, you might have them go through the student training in 1 Minute Reader Live so they can get started in that independent program. Then once they're doing those training videos and getting started in 1 Minute Reader Live, you can place each one individually into the other interventions. That's a really slick way to get the program up and running. Last thing I just want to mention is, again, that every step is adjustable. So you can change story options, turn steps on or off. You can adjust some steps in multiple ways. So if a step or couple steps aren't working well for 1 or 2 of your students, make a change. It is designed to meet each kid where they're at. So you can make those changes at any point. Now, thank you for your attention and your time today. We did cover very briefly big picture information about the 4 programs in Read Live, including Read Naturally Live, Word Warm-Ups Live, 1 Minute Reader Live, and our Español version. Do have a couple minutes left for questions. Christy, did any questions come through to you?
Yeah, is there a way to try Read Live?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we have a trial, and Christy, if you could put maybe a link to that trial form in the chat box, that would be wonderful. We always offer a 60-day free trial of Read Live. So that allows you to try it with as many students as you want. You can indicate however many you want to try it with for 60 days. It is a truly no risk trial. So if you do nothing with it, or if you work in it, at the end of 60 days, it will simply stop working. You do not need to cancel it. It just stops working. We never take money or credit card information for the trial. So there's truly no risk. But if you use it, it is the actual program. So if you use it and you decide to purchase, then all that data will still be in that account. And if it has to lapse for a little bit, we do save data for a little while. And so that data will remain in the account so that when you come back to utilizing it for next school year or something, you will be able to pick up where students left off. And again, that's a 60-day free trial. Sign up on our website and see if it works. There's no program in the world that works with every student in every situation. And so for all 3 decades we've been around, we always offer trials and encourage teachers to see if this program is a good match for them. So again, thank you all very much for your time today. Please check out our other webinars on our website and reach out to us when your questions arise. I hope you have a great afternoon.